This is Fred Beck from Fred Talks Fighting, and today we're very lucky to be joined by Jacob Stitch Duran. So thank you very much for coming on.
Well, thank you, Fred. I appreciate it. And, I could say I helped you get your career going as a young man, and we'll see where you'll be at 10 years from now. So congratulations.
So what I want to start with is that how did you originally get into boxing and become a Cutman? So I believe you ran a kickboxing gym and boxing gym back in the day.
Yeah, big time. I grew up as a kid, always had the dream if I joined the military that if I went to the Orient that I'd study the martial arts. During my time, Bruce Lee was the big name. And at that time, it was only karate. So I got to Thailand. I was stationed in Thailand in 1972. And I saw my first Muay Thai fight. And from there, I literally became addicted. And I trained that whole year in Thailand, and then got back and got into boxing to kind of improve my hands. And then from there, I went to start teaching amateurs boxing. And then I opened up my own school of kickboxing and learned how to do everything as a trainer, as a manager, and then of course as a cutman. So the cutman kind of floated to the top, Fred, and here I am. I used to train fighters, but I'm just happy being a cutman now.
And did you prefer being a Cutman over trainer? It sounds like what I've seen in interviews before and read online, that you're actually a pretty good trainer at the time.
Oh yeah, no, I trained. Worked with a lot of big fighters, a lot of world champions. I even had the privilege of doing hand pads for Mike Tyson for a couple of weeks.
And that was when Mike Tyson was about to train Freddie Roach.
Yeah, well, right before Freddie
Right
Roach
before.
came, yeah, Panama Lewis, who just passed away actually about a month ago, called me, and because I used to do pads for guys, I had an 8 to 5 job, I had a full-time job, so I couldn't be a full-time trainer, but I love training. So he called me, yeah, and I had to do pads for him. So I was fortunate. I've had all spectrums of the sport. I've been there and I've done that.
And so obviously you preferred being a Cutman the most. And what type of training do you have to go through to become a Cutman? Or do you just hang around in the gyms and learn stuff with other trainers?
that's a good question. You're very wise for your a young age, but unfortunately, when I was learning to be a cut man, it was boxing only, right? And I always tell the old story where I was at a boxing show and I saw this guy do a great job on a cut, and I went over there and I let him know. I say, hey, look, I'm learning to be a cut man. Can you tell me what you did? And that was boxing at that time, right? And he says, F you. He goes, you got to learn like me, and I'm taking this to my grave. And he walked away. But that's the way boxing used to be at that time. And I always told myself I'd never be like this man. So as I learned, I also wanted to teach, so that I wouldn't be in that position that that man put me in. But now, I do seminars and I'll instruct anybody. But I always tell people, everybody, I get calls, Fred, from doctors, paramedics, nurses, housewives, guys like you. Everybody wants to be a cutman because they see what we do. But getting to your point, I always tell them is, you got to spend hours, days, weeks, months, and years in the gym being a fighter, learning what these fighters go through, not only on the physical aspect, but on the mental side, because the mental game in combat sports is extremely important.
What exactly makes a good Cutman?
Well, I think, number one is keeping your composure. That's key, number one. Understanding the fighters, like they, on the mental side, on the physical side, and then obviously is having the right tools available. And I'll kind of get into the equipment that we use. But for the most part, throughout the world, the medication that we use, the one that you put on a swab that goes in a cut, that's adrenaline chloride 1000. And the theory is you put that liquid into the cut, it absorbs into the blood vessels and it closes up the blood vessels. Now, in the UK and even Germany, whenever we work a world title fight, the commission in the ring will actually give you a bottle of unopened adrenaline chloride 1000. So those are the medications. The N12, that metal piece that we use, cold direct pressure, that's used for swelling. And, the ice pack, of course, and Vaseline. And the theory of Vaseline is that the punches will slip off, but that doesn't seem to be working because I work on a lot of cuts.
And do they all Do all the fighters' teams supply you with this equipment, or do you have to buy it and bring it along yourself?
No, you have to supply your own stuff. I always tell young cutmen or anybody is always prepare for the worst case scenario. Even things that you think you might not need but are valuable in the sport, take it with you. But no, you can't depend on these teams to bring you the stuff that you as a cutman will need. So you have to supply your own equipment.
In when you're going into a fight, do you hope that the fighter, won't need your help, or is something inside you saying, "Oh, hopefully at some point in the fight they'll need my help when I can step in"?
Oh man, I get bored when the fights don't get cut. I'm going to tell you that. But and like I say, I always prepare for the worst case scenario. But whenever I work MMA show, now I'm working the bare knuckle fights. The cut ratio on those are extremely high. So I know I'm going to get work one way or the other. But like Tyson Fury, for instance, when I worked with him based on the cut that he had before I came on board, when he fought Deontay Wilder, I told him I was going to take care of him and I was going to do a lot of preventive maintenance so that it would minimize the probability of him getting cut. I was going to keep ice on his face every round just to keep the swelling controlled. I was going to use the KO swell, the metal piece, just to work on him and definitely apply Vaseline on him, probably a little bit more than I would somebody else. So
I believe that the bare knuckle boxing cut ratio is 70-30, so it's quite likely they're always going to get cut. And do you find that some fighters, obviously the bare knuckle fighters, but some fighters are more susceptible for getting cut, like their fighting style or them having to cut a lot of weight?
that's a very good question, and it's based more on the fighting style. Uh, I'm working a fight this weekend. Inui from Japan is defending his world title against Jason Maloney from Australia, and I'll be working with Maloney. But I worked with him in a fight before, and I've seen how Inui fights, and that's the kind of work where I don't predict who's going to win, Fred. I always say is I look at the probability of the importance of a good cut man. And in this fight, I think it's going to be important to have a good cut man. So it's a lot of it style of fighting, but bone structure. Some guys have more protruding bone than somebody else. As you make contact, and it's going to be easier to get cut. So there's a lot of variables that go with that, but you always prepare for all of that.
So I guess it's how long the fighter's been in the game for, how many wars they've been in. So speaking of cuts, what are some of the nastiest cuts you've had to deal with?
Oh, tons, brother. I've seen them all. I've seen, cuts that go up to there. You can see the skull. Seen those many, many times,
I
right?
believe that one was Forrest Griffin, wasn't it? In the UFC.
Well, that was compared to other ones. That was pretty basic. But I'll tell you the story with that type of cut is that big vein when you laugh, that big vein you have between your eyes. Well, what happened there is when he fought Shogun, he literally popped that vein, and that's a very, very big vein to control. But I used everything, and I applied a lot of pressure. I used the adrenaline. I also used another medication called Avitine that's like a cotton candy type of form, and you plug up the cut, and that dehydrates or that coagulates the blood. So yeah, I always kind of prepare for him. But Stefan Struve in the UFC, his lip was literally shredded to the point where it looked like a shark just bit him. And I go to start working on him, and the doctor's looking at him with the probability of stopping the fight. And Stefan Struve still wants to continue. So that's why I mentioned earlier, psychology is important. I told the doctor, I said, look, he's going to be okay if you got a good plastic surgeon, and the guys that were recording it in the truck, they all started laughing because they heard that comment. The doctor let the fight continue, and Stefan Struve ended up winning the fight.
Do you have any other experiences of bad cuts where sometimes you might not be able to fix the cut, or have you always done your best and managed to fix it?
Yeah, no, I've always done my best. My first really coming out fight when I moved to Las Vegas, I've been in Las Vegas 26 years now. I worked with what was it? Raul Marquez was the middleweight champion of the world, I think, for the IBF. And he ended up with 5 cuts, 2 big ones here and then one on the nose, something like 70 stitches. and I kept him in the game, and he defended his world title. And that was my first coming out party, because I had a lot of experience in kickboxing as a cut man, and just, I made the move to Vegas, Las Vegas here, because that's where all the big boys were at. So that was a big one. But outside of that, there's other injuries, like broken legs. I've encountered a couple guys, Anderson Silva, one of them, when he fought Chris Weidman, when he broke his leg. And, an hour before, that hurt me because I was wrapping his hands an hour before, and we're joking around, and just to see him there with a broken leg was very hard to accept. There was another guy that broke his leg earlier, Corey Hill, years before. And I'm holding his shoulders on the ground, and I look at his leg, and his leg is like this and his foot's like this. And he goes, "What happened, Stitch? What happened?" I said, "Man, Corey, you broke your leg. Go ahead and scream as much as you want." And but what was nice with that, to show you the heart of the warrior, the gladiator, they shot him up with a couple shots of morphine before they put him on the stretcher and took him out. And as they had him on the stretcher, they're walking him out. He looks at me, he says, "Stitch, I almost had him." So to me, I think that was a very, very gallant part on his part. And then he was looking for his father, so like say, deep in heart, deep inside, all these fighters, even though they're modern day gladiators, deep inside, they're all babies, and you got to look at them that way too.
And do any cuts ever surprise you anymore? Because at the start of your cutman career, did you ever get shocked when they had a massive cut over their eyebrow or on their cheek? Did any cuts ever surprise you anymore, or are you just used to it all by now?
Yeah, they're all pretty, a cut is a cut nowadays, and I think I've seen them in just about every part of the face, and, to include the ears and, or the head, and even in the ear, so I've seen that. And I haven't worked on a couple cuts where it was, I think kickboxing, MMA, where the guys are doing the chin check, and the bone on the shin, you get a big cut there. And those are extremely hard to work on, because the cartilage is very thin, and you can apply pressure, but it's very, very tough to close.
And how do you actually practice? So before you're a fight and you're learning to be a cut man, how do you practice fixing cuts on the shin bone or above the eyebrow?
Just good common sense. Like I said, there were no schools when I was at that stage of my career. So it was all just common sense. How would you stop a cut? How many times have you gotten cut, Fred, and you go just put your finger on the cut for about a minute and it stops bleeding, correct? Well, you have to understand, blood has a tendency of coagulating itself with direct pressure. But as I was learning through the ropes, not being like that guy that didn't want to teach me, I always spoke and with the ringside doctors, especially here in Las Vegas, because these guys are the best in the world. And they would give me their medical opinions on how to work on these cuts, and how to apply the proper pressure, and how to apply the proper medications. So a lot of learning, and, and everything that I've learned, I've always tried to pass on, because the way I look at it is you as a coach will show your fighter how to fight, but nobody shows a coach how to take care of the fighter. And I think that's my commitment to giving back to this sport.
And so I remember Tyson Fury's his fight against Otto Wallen. He had a very nasty cut, and the cutman,
Yes.
he did a very good job of it. And you had Tyson Fury's cut man in the rematch of Wilder. Do you think for his next fight, I think it's in London, do you think he'll be as cut man for that fight?
Well, I hope so. It's not as big as a fight as Deontay Wilder, and with this COVID, flying in and flying out. I don't know what the regulations are on that, the strict rules on that. But Cutman, we're like insurance policies. If you drive a Ferrari, your insurance is going to be a little bit higher, but you always want to pay for an insurance policy in case you have some kind of accident. So you always prepare for the worst case scenario. Be nice to go back to London, and under these circumstances, but just to work with Tyson Fury, the guy's he's a pleasure to work with, and it was a fun project to be there working with him for 2 weeks before the fight. So I hope so. I hope I get to go to London.
And do you have a prediction for when Tyson Fury fights Andy Joshua? Do you have a prediction for that fight?
As to who wins?
Yeah.
Yeah, I worked with Vladimir Klitschko, right, when he fought Tyson Fury. And I think just like everybody in the Klitschko theme, we thought it was going to be a fairly easy night of fights based on the style of fighting that Tyson Fury had, opposed to the disciplined style of fighting that Vladimir Klitschko had. But now when I saw him fight, and I told Tyson, I said, when you fought Vladimir, I thought we were going to win easily. But when I saw you fight Deontay Wilder, I understood why Vladimir lost, because you're very, very difficult to read as a fighter. And your defense, you can't teach that to anybody else. That is your specific style of fighting. Just like Floyd Mayweather, that's his specific style of fighting, and nobody could duplicate that. The same thing with Tyson Fury. So going into the Anthony Joshua fight, I see the same results as when Tyson Fury fought Vladimir Klitschko. I don't know if Anthony Joshua will be able to read that type of fight style that Tyson Fury has. Very, very difficult to read.
Is there ever any bad blood? For example, say you've been a cut man for one of the fighters, Klitschko, and then you're a cut man for Anthony Joshua a few years later. Is there any awkwardness there, like bad blood?
No, not at all. That's the thing. It should be a compliment to Vladimir Klitschko that, I worked with him for 12 years. And, and my job is to take care of fighters, plain and simple. There's many, many times like in MMA where I'll wrap your hands, but I'll work the other guy's corner, So Vladimir and the whole team know that I'm there for a specific purpose, and that's to take care of the fighters. So no bad blood whatsoever.
When KSI fought Logan Paul, you were KSI's cut man.
Yes.
He'll be his cut man again for when he fights Jake.
Oh, I think the chances are excellent, and the thing with KSI and even Gib, I didn't know who KSI was, find out that this kid has like 20 million followers and, just the big shit. Right. But what a good kid, man. And I told him, because I wrapped his hands every day, is that, here you are a fighter. I'm going to treat you just like you're a fighter. But he really impressed me with his athleticism and his desire to want to learn. Gib, on the other hand, was entirely different because he didn't even know who I was, so he wasn't as astute. I don't think he was an athlete growing up, but taking that aside, the training that he did in the gym, preparing for his fight against Jake Paul, I got to give him a ton of respect because he literally turned from a sheep into a lion. And even though it was, not a good night, the training process, he should be proud of what he did. I just saw Jake Paul about 3 weeks ago. It's funny you asked because my grandkids are big fans of Jake Paul. One is 5 and the other one is 8, right? So show you what I know about that. But I knew that he was going to be training at Las Vegas at Bones Adams' gym. So I called Bones Adams and I said, look, ask Jake Paul if that my grandkids are big fans of his, if I could take him to meet him. And yeah, he opened up his doors. We're all, it's not like we hate any, this is a sport. So it was nice. So I didn't tell my grandkids. So I get into the gym and Jake Paul is getting out of his van, getting ready to go train. And the kids, they got so excited, they ran into the car, so they had a chance to take pictures with Jake Paul and Jake Paul wished my granddaughter, Ava, a happy birthday. So their dream came true, but it's that type of thing is, this is a sport and, you always want to bring the best people on board. And if KSI fights Jake Paul, then I would definitely love to work with him again.
I mean, there's a lot of criticism of YouTube boxing and how they shouldn't be main evented that fight. But I kind of feel if it brings more eyes to the sport and you kind of young breed to the sport, as in the youngsters all getting into boxing, picking up a pair of gloves, going to the gym, and all for the better. And as well as being excellent cut man, you've also starred in a few movies. What was that like? Even on your T-shirt right now, what was that like starring Creed?
Yeah.
Or Rocky?
Well, it's funny. I put this shirt on with not even thinking about this, but only because it was a little cold. We're in Las Vegas, it's starting to get a little cool, and we're not used to the cold, right? So I put this on and just kind of kill that. But yeah, I've been in 6 movies. I've been real blessed to have gotten called, and I've done the first one I did was with Woody Harrelson and Antonio Banderas, Play It to the Bone. I did Ocean's 11 when Vladimir Klitschko fought Lennox Lewis when they robbed the casino. And from there on, I started working with Vladimir Klitschko after that. I did one with Kevin James, Salma Hayek, Here Comes the Boom, which is an MMA movie. And then I did Balboa when Rocky fought his last fight. And then, of course, I did Creed 1 and Creed 2, working side by side with Sylvester Stallone and Michael B. Jordan. But, you know, like I say, Fred, how many guys do you know get the opportunity to do 3 movies with Sylvester Stallone? So I've been blessed. You know, I know I've been blessed, but I've been put in this position, and I always tell people, you know, you get put in a position and do it. You know, you could always, you could always learn from that.
And I only got a couple more questions.
Sure.
Who came up with the nickname Stitch?
Good question. I was just talking about that the other day. When I had gotten out of the military and I started training kickboxers, I used to work with Dennis Alexio, which was the heavyweight champ of the world in kickboxing. And if you remember the movie Kickboxer with Jean-Claude Van Damme, well, Dennis Alexio was the brother in the wheelchair. Great athlete, great, tremendous athlete. Well, his sparring partner, Dave Rooney, they both fought on the same card. And I was learning to be a cutman at that time. And like I say, nobody would teach you how to be a cutman. So I studied what other cutmen would do. And he got a small cut. And what I did is I got a piece of tape and I made them into little thin strips. I closed the cut. I butterflied it, is what I did. And Dave Rooney says, man, you saved me some stitches. I'm going to call you Stitch. And from there on, that name stuck. And, you know, Dave Rooney, from that moment on, years, I've lost contact with him. Last thing I know is I knew that he was a fisherman in Alaska. But I don't know if he knows how much that name has stuck with me, and it literally changed my career. People all over the world know me as Stitch. They don't even know my real name.
And one more thing, Jacob, or Stitch. If I ever did come out to America in a few years' time, do you think maybe I'd come to you and we could do another interview and you could show me around some of the boxes there?
Of course, you know, that's anytime I'd be glad to. There's no place like Las Vegas when it comes to boxing, literally. You know, the fights in the casinos, you know, they got the Mayweather gym, City Boxing Gym, Salas's gym, Bones Adams gyms. That's where you see a lot of the great fighters that are training. They're just everyday people. But I'd be more than glad to take you around and introduce you to some of the people and, you know, hook you up with interviews. And don't worry about it. I'll take care of you on that aspect. But, you know, it's always important, Fred, is to always give back, you know, and, you know, I'm privileged to be in the position that I'm at, but I never forget up where I was at before. And so I always give back, and answering to your question, yeah, I'd be more than glad to meet with you again and to hook you up with some additional interviews.
Thank you very much for the interview. And I believe you got a book out at the moment.
Yeah, I actually, there's 2 books out. They're called From the Fields to the Garden. Growing up as a young kid, growing to an adult, I was a farm worker. So literally every summer when the fruits and the vegetables had to be picked, I was picking them. And, you know, I always say, you know, if you picked them, I ate them. So those are the name of the book is The Fields, the Fields to the Garden. So the fields are where I grew up as a farm worker, and the garden is Madison Square Garden, which was my goal to reach. And I've been there many times for boxing and for MMA. But based off of those books, and those are available at Amazon.com, by the way, From the Fields to the Garden 1 and 2. But adding to that, before we close, is they're starting to film a documentary on my life based off the book, From the Fields to the Garden. And the first footage that we got were actually when Triple G fought, of all places, Madison Square Garden. So that was supposed to be our last part of the filming, but being that he was filming there, the producer made the adjustments, and we went to New York, and they got 3 days worth of filming. So hopefully that'll be coming out in 2021.
Well, I'll put the link in the description for anyone who wants to read the book. And so thank you very much for the interview. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, my man. Good luck to yourself. And like I said, when you come to Las Vegas, come on down. And let me add one more story to complement the Brits, right? Is when Vladimir Klitschko fought Anthony Joshua, we're at Wembley Stadium, 90,000 people, right? But I always say 90,000 Brits is the equivalent of about 150 of somebody else in any other country. They were great, great fans to the point where it was like the Rocky Balboa movie, where at the end, even though Vladimir lost, they were cheering, Klitschko, Klitschko, Klitschko. And Vladimir said, of all the fights I ever had, I never had the respect I did like I did then. So that worked out good. So anyway, so the Brits I love the Brits, man. They're good fans and definitely loud at what they do.
Yeah, they are. All right. Thank you very much for the interview, Stitch.
All right, my bless. And you be safe. All the guys in the UK, you guys stay safe and hope to see you guys soon.
All right. Thank you.